Hi, I'm Joel Wagner. Thank you for tuning in and having a look at my presentation on autism. What is autism? Autism spectrum disorder is a developmental condition affecting and impairing stuff like social relationships, communication, interests, the level of engagement with those interests, imagination and perspective, and it's really important to note that it's likely to continue through to adulthood. It's explained as on a spectrum as every person with autism is unique and they display different behaviours in different areas. There's just a little table there if you'd like to have a look at it, explaining sort of the severity and change in those. Some of the experiences are things like unusual sensory interests, such as sniffing objects, etc. Sensory sensitivities, including avoiding what would otherwise be perceived as an everyday sound or sight, and some intellectual impairments as well. In the classroom, an autistic student will be impacted in a variety of ways. I've narrowed those down into two based on a couple of studies. One was social communication and the other is patterns of behaviour. So with their social communication, children in the classroom can find it really difficult to talk with classmates, teachers and others, understand non-verbal communication such as language and gestures, and finally socialise with their peers and other adults. Patterns of behaviour, it's really hard sometimes for these students to understand what is being said, to be able to express what they need, and to understand the perspective of those around them. It can make it really difficult for them in the classroom. Some common behaviours arising from these difficulties are things like playing alone, children having unusual interests or attachments, displaying an inability to cope with change, and displaying distress in what would otherwise be a normal stimuli or situation. Some classroom strategies. There's numerous strategies. The two that I chose to focus on were differential reinforcement and video modelling. Differential reinforcement of the alternative, incompatible or other behaviour is quite common in the classroom and it's been proven to have a really significant impact. The idea behind it is to provide positive reinforcement for desirable behaviours and not provide any negative reinforcement for undesirable behaviours. A study by Wong in 2014 found that this positive reinforcement, rather than focusing on negative, had a direct correlation with the positive task being learnt and understood. There's also a lot of different positive reinforcers that you'll be able to see at the bottom there. Video modelling is another excellent way to model the behaviour that we want to encourage, or the skill that we want to encourage. There's four basic ways to do it. The first is basic, where the footage of someone else is shown to the learner. Self-modelling is where the footage of the learner displays the target behaviour or skill. And point of view, where the footage recorded is from the perspective of the learner and what they'll see. And video prompting is where we can break those behaviours and skills into steps and chunks to help them understand how to implement them. Well, this is a really important thing because autistic children are often described as 90% visual and 10% auditory learners. And the other thing is we're in a smartphone era where this sort of technology in video modelling is at our fingertips at all times. So it should really be looked at and implemented as much as possible. Some teaching strategies. The overarching goal for the teacher should be to provide the student with a safe and inviting environment so that the student can realise their full potential in that environment. And first and foremost, I think the teachers need to gain an understanding of the student, their place on the spectrum, and the stimuli affecting that student. If teachers can gain that knowledge, they can aim to reduce anxiety, the stimulators that provide that anxiety, and plan their lessons and environments diligently. Some proactive strategies include stuff like Compic reminders, visual guides and daily timetables, constant verbal reminders of schedule, and one of the big things for autistic students and all students is managing transition from space to space and lesson to lesson. If we can minimise those transitions, it'll help a lot. Some sensory needs. Students will often rely on varying stimuli such as time, touch, pressure and sounds, and being a receptive teacher will mean catering for these needs and making them a part of the daily routine that will help the student. Finally, I've already outlined the 90-10 perspective on verbal and non-verbal, and Kogel outlined the fact that autism hinders communication and the effect that communication has with directing behavioural change. Outcomes for students will be far greater if a teacher is conscious of the need for both verbal and non-verbal communication in the classroom. Finally, the importance of partnership. Schools, teachers, parents and the community need to work together if positive outcomes are to be met. The SCIRTS model is a really good example of this, recognising that learning in childhood occurs in social contexts of daily lives, and the efforts to support child's development occur with caregivers and familiar partners in everyday routines in a variety of social situations. The SCIRTS model, it's a little acronym. The first part is social communication, the second, emotional regulation, and the third, the most important with partnerships, is transactional support, which is really just the development of supports to help partners respond to child needs and interests, modify and adapt environments, and provide learning and enhancement tools. Guys, thank you very much for listening to my presentation. I hope you found it valuable. Thank you.